"Mom, that boy over there is my brother," the boy said to his millionaire mother, pointing to a child on the street. What they didn't know yet was that this child was actually Beatrice. Was walking home after a quick stop at the market, strolling down the sidewalk with João, her 6-year-old son. He trotted beside her, clutching a small bag with strawberry juice in both hands. He was completely fascinated by the color of the straw and wouldn't stop talking between sips. Suddenly, João stopped. His eyes locked onto something or someone a little farther ahead. In front of a newsstand, a boy stood silently, shy-looking, with a pair of eyes that seemed like they wanted to tell a secret. Beatrice was already thinking about hurrying along when she heard João's confident voice. "Mom, that's my brother." His fingers tightened around the juice bag. The traffic noise didn't drown him out. João's words came through clearly, like a punch to the chest. Beatrice froze. She looked at him, then at the boy by the newsstand. He was older than João, maybe by a year, but there was something in his eyes, the curve of his lips, the way he stood, that took Beatrice's breath away. "Honey, what did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling as she tried to stay calm. João didn't answer. He kept pointing at the boy with a certainty that left no room for doubt. Beatrice stepped closer, slowly. The boy was wearing a worn-out t-shirt, broken shoes. Next to him stood a woman who looked anxious but caring. She held his shoulder and spoke to him softly. Just a normal scene, two random people in the middle of the city. But for Beatrice, nothing felt normal in that moment. She knelt down next to João and took his hand. "Are you sure?" He nodded firmly. Summoning her courage, she walked toward the woman. The world around her seemed to go quiet. "Excuse me, may I ask the boy's name?" she asked in a thin voice. The boy turned around, a little embarrassed. It was the woman who answered. "His name is Rafael." The name hit her like lightning. Rafael, the name she and her husband had picked for a second child before he died. "How old is he?" she asked, her voice barely real. 7, just had a birthday. 7 years old. João was 6, just 1 year apart. Beatrice felt unsteady. The words slipped out on their own. "I had a husband. Before he died, he always said he felt like someone was missing." The woman was watching her closely now. Beatrice added, almost without realizing it, "I never thought I'd find myself here, like this." Rafael was looking at her, curious. João gripped his mother's hand tightly. "Mom, do you see him? He looks just like me." The woman next to Rafael seemed like she was about to speak, but stayed quiet. Her expression shifted. Silence settled between them, as a breeze moved strands of Beatrice's hair across her forehead. The juice bag had fallen to the ground. City sounds carried on in the background, distant now, like they no longer belonged to that moment. A car horn, the hiss of a bus. But for Beatrice, time had stopped. A thought shot through her mind like a flash. What if he really is my son? Her breathing slowed, her hands trembled. And in the middle of that screaming silence, Beatrice understood that some encounters are never just coincidences. She had raised João as her own from day one. She didn't know who his mother was or where he really came from. Still, she had protected him, fed him, comforted him, the way only a mother knows how. That day, her husband's broken, uncertain voice came back to her. "I don't know who his mother is," he had said, voice shaking, throat dry, eyes lost in the distance. João, meanwhile, had gone quiet. He rested his head against Beatrice's arm while she kept staring at Rafael's face. She studied it, mind racing, the shape of his forehead, the bridge of his nose, the line of his eyebrows. Something in it stole her breath. It was like seeing the reflection of a dream that had shattered too long ago. She thought of Arthur, of what he had done before he died. That's when everything cracked. It was no longer just a walk, no longer a coincidence. Something inside her had lit up, like a key turning in a long-forgotten lock. Around her, the world carried on. Traffic, footsteps, a bus continuing down its route. But for Beatrice, time had frozen. The seconds stretched out, and the little plaza felt like another planet. Rafael, with those wide eyes, had locked gazes with João, and Joan stood still, looking at him like someone staring into an old mirror that tells stories long forgotten. That night, Beatrice sat on the couch, her body rigid, almost weightless. The TV was on, playing some cartoon, but Joan wasn't really watching. His eyes wandered, then he said softly, "Mom, he looked a lot like me, didn't he?" That phrase echoed inside her like something that wouldn't fade. It was as if Joan had pressed a button she didn't even know existed. Pretending she looked down at her phone, pretended to read a message, but inside, it was a different story. Since they got back home, she hadn't been at peace. The coffee she made was still untouched. The smell had filled the kitchen, but the taste was gone from her mouth. Her head wouldn't stop spinning. Raphael's face, the way he looked at her, Joan's words. It felt like someone had opened, with invisible hands, a box she had kept shut for years, a box full of pain. She grabbed her phone and started going through old photos of Arthur. In one, Joan was still a baby. She zoomed in. There was a similar light in his eyes. The shape of the nose, the line of the eyebrows, identical to Raphael's. A shiver ran down her spine. She stood up, walked to the window, and opened it to get some air. But the wind outside was too strong. She shut it again. Inside, the heat felt strange, almost like a fever. The master bedroom still looked untouched by time. Arthur's scent, a shirt she never had the courage to throw away. She always told herself it was just nostalgia. But now, it was more than that. She opened the closet, pulled out an old box full of photographs. One picture in particular caught her eye. Arthur, smiling at a work lunch, surrounded by colleagues, and right beside him, Luciana, the secretary, always elegant, always a little too close. Beatrice had never liked her, and now something felt off, like it had been for a long time. She looked in the mirror for a few seconds. She looked exhausted, but it wasn't physical fatigue. It was a weight on her chest, a growing knot. She sat at the edge of the bed, tried to remember if Arthur had ever left any clue. Maybe he had, but she hadn't wanted to see it. Joan walked into the room with a toy car in his hand. He climbed onto the bed and lay down beside her. "Mom, can we see that boy again?" The words were at the tip of her tongue. She wanted to say no, but stopped. She looked at him. It was Joan who had sensed it first, as if he had a radar in his heart. She stroked his hair and said they'd talk later. But inside, she was a storm. When Joan fell asleep, Beatrice turned on the computer in the study corner. She opened the browser, and she began to search. Old information about the company Arthur worked for, about the people around him, about a truth that maybe, finally, was coming to light. She found Luciana's name in old, yellow documents. Then, almost by accident, she stumbled across an old photo on a long-forgotten social media account. The profile had been inactive for years, but that face was still there, suspended in time. Beatrice stared at it for a long time, as if trying to read an answer in the lines of her expression. Could it really be that this woman had hidden a child from his own father? And if she had, why? Why disappear like that? She slammed the laptop shut, as if the truth had burned her fingers. She rested her forehead on the desk, as silence filled the house like a weight. Only the ticking of the hallway clock broke through, a sound that now felt like torture. She didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain: she couldn't ignore it. Something inside her was screaming. It wasn't just doubt, it was guilt, it was anger, it was fear. She stood up slowly, as if the floor had turned unstable, walked over to her son's bedroom door, opened it quietly. Joan was sleeping, breathing deep, peaceful, completely unaware of the storm his innocent words had unleashed. Beatrice sat next to his bed. She watched him, as if his face might hold the answers, as if the closed eyes of a child could reveal the secrets of a hidden past. The night passed slowly, almost motionless. She couldn't sleep. The scene on the sidewalk, the way the boy looked at her, as if he already knew her, as if he felt something too, kept replaying in her mind. It wasn't normal. It couldn't be just a feeling. Yet inside her, a small voice wanted to believe, wanted it to be true. At dawn, she finally drifted off, But when she woke up, she was different. She wouldn't pretend nothing had happened. She needed the truth, even if it hurt, even if it was the worst truth of all. She stopped on the threshold of Arthur's old room. The air smelled of forgotten things, of memories that stubbornly refused to leave. Nothing had been touched in months since he left. Everything was exactly as he had left it, not out of nostalgia, but out of fear. Fear of what she might feel if she opened that door again. She turned on the light. The bedside lamp was still crooked, just as he always left it. He used to say it brought good luck. Beatrice had hated that superstition, but she never fixed it. Now it seemed almost sweet, as if in that small quirk she could still hear his voice. She opened the top drawer of the nightstand. Documents, receipts, an old birthday postcard she had written herself, her hand shaking with emotion. But she wasn't there for sentiment. She was looking for answers. At the back of the drawer, she found a thin grey folder she had never seen before. Inside were documents from the old company where Arthur had worked for years. Names, meeting minutes, and then a handwritten note, signed by Luciana. "Arthur, I left the reports with Marcos. I'll call you later." Few words. Simple. But in that context, surrounded by such personal things, they didn't feel professional at all. There was something more. She went to the closet, pulled down a heavy box. It was full of memories, albums, letters, papers kept without any real reason. Digging through, she found a yellowed envelope. Inside, a letter folded in four. She recognized the handwriting immediately. "Bea, I know one day you might find this letter. If I'm not with you, I just wanted you to know that it was never easy for me to live with what happened. I made a mistake. I was weak, and that guilt has never left me, not for a single moment." Beatrice froze. Her heart was pounding, her throat tight. She folded the letter, but couldn't put it away. She sat on the floor, her back against the bed. The silence was so deep that even the sound of the paper seemed deafening. She opened it again, continued reading. "It only happened once. I was going through a hard time. The company was struggling. You and I were fighting a lot. Luciana was there. She listened. She comforted me. I was a fool. Just once, but it had consequences. She told me she was pregnant, then she disappeared. I never heard from her again. I looked for her, but no one knew anything. When you told me you were expecting João, I decided to bury it all. Not say a word." Beatrice's hands trembled. It was as if the past, after years, had woken up, and now it was speaking to her, in a clear voice, a cruel one. Beatrice closed her eyes tightly. In that moment, she understood everything. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was the truth, raw and naked, and the hardest part to accept was the anger rising inside her. Anger, yes, but also a small relief. At last, she had an answer. There was no longer any doubt. With the letter still clutched in her hands, she stood up and went to the kitchen. She put the water on to boil, like always, without thinking. The motions were the same, but her mind was far away, years back. That past she had sworn to bury was here now, sitting at the table, whispering, "I'm back." She sat down with the cup still empty, and looked at the letter on the table. Who could she tell? João was too young to understand, and even she didn't know what to do with that truth. She thought of Simone, her best friend, picked up her phone, opened the contact, but then changed her mind. She couldn't talk. She still had to digest it all alone. She walked to the mirror in the living room, looked at herself, as if searching for the woman she had been, but she wasn't there anymore. Now she was someone else, someone who knew. The past doesn't stay buried forever. Sooner or later it comes to light. She went back to the bedroom, left everything as it was. But this time she didn't lock the door. She knew that from that moment on, she would have to go in there many more times. Elsewhere, Raphael was waking up to the soft sound of crying beside him. It was Donna Nilda, trying to hide her tears under a thin blanket. It was cold that morning, and the cardboard was no longer enough to keep the wind out along Marquesa Street. Next to her, Adin slept with his head resting on an old backpack. Raphael pretended not to see. He was used to scenes like this. He knew they cried in silence so he wouldn't worry, but he always saw them. He got up slowly, slipped on his old shoes, went to the corner where they kept a few cookies, took one and let it melt in his mouth, not even chewing. He stood there still, watching the street, the passing cars, the rushing lives, and him, motionless. It was the only life he knew, never a real bed, never a home. But Raphael was awake. He knew the streets, the names, the faces. He didn't complain. He just wanted to be with Nilda and Adam. They had taken him in. They were like grandparents, the only ones who hadn't looked away. And then, across the street, that face, that woman. She had looked at him the day before, with a boy by her side. He couldn't get her out of his head. He hadn't slept well. Those eyes, that way of wanting to say something. The boy, so much like him, and it confused him in a way he didn't know how to explain. Nilda woke up, wiped her eyes and smiled at him. "Good morning, my boy," she said. He nodded and helped her to her feet. "Do you want some tea?" He always called her Grandma, and she, though she pretended to protest, loved the name. Edom was also beginning to stir, stretching with a tired old man's groan. They all drank some tea left over from the day before. Raphael was quiet, distracted. He couldn't shake the image of the boy, so much like him, and it bothered him, though he didn't know why. Later they went to the plaza, like always. Nilda laid a blanket on the ground and arranged the little things they sold. Keychains, pens, some plastic toys. Raphael sat beside her, playing with a toy car. "Always smile at people," she told him. "That's how we make a little something." And he smiled. But he watched. He always watched. A woman holding a dog, a boy with a guitar, an older lady with shopping bags. But nothing distracted him from the thought of that woman and that boy. It was an afternoon like any other when a group of kids ran down the street, their laughter filling the air like a gust of joy. Raphael stood there, still, when one of them ran into him without looking back. Without apologizing, they kept going, leaving Raphael on the ground, face against the pavement. He didn't complain, just lay there in silence. Donna Nilda nearby rushed to help him up and brush him off. Senor Adam, from his doorstep, raised his voice, annoyed at the rude boy, but soon calmed down. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Raphael asked, looking at the ground, as if the world weighed more than ever. Since that day, something inside him began to change, although he didn't know how or where that transformation would take him. As the sun began to set, Raphael returned to his usual refuge, a corner between old, forgotten walls near an abandoned building. There, with 2 worn-out mattresses and some clothes stored in bags, the boy found a bit of peace. Before closing his eyes, he listened to the distant noise of the street and asked himself over and over again who he really was. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Beatrice woke up with a heavy head, still trapped in the memories of a sleepless night. Arthur's letter was still there, hidden in a drawer, like a secret begging to be heard. She knew the story with Luciana hadn't ended with her disappearance. It had simply been buried, swept under the rug of forgetfulness. She took a deep breath and decided not to hold back anymore. She turned on the computer, searched for Luciana's name, and started digging through old profiles and forgotten posts. A clue appeared, a message from a friend, lost in time, that read, "I miss you, where are you?" The reply, from 2 years ago, spoke of a quiet coast, a different place. Beatrice reached out to that friend, afraid but determined to find answers. Then she called Simone to share the essentials: Arthur's letter, the possibility of a hidden child, and the suspicion that Raphael might be that boy. Simone promised to help. Soon after, a new lead emerged, an old email address that might open a door. Without overthinking it, Beatrice sent a direct and urgent message to Luciana, making it clear she needed to talk about her son. At the same time, worry about Raphael grew. Beatrice needed to know where he was, who he lived with, if he was okay. So she turned to a detective, a trustworthy man who had once worked with Arthur, and asked him to start investigating, beginning with a street stall on Silva Porto where Raphael had been seen. The detective agreed without hesitation. It was only the beginning of a search that would change everything. Beatrice put the phone down on the table and lay on the couch, exhausted but with her heart beating fast, that feeling that finally something was shifting. She would no longer sit and wait for things to resolve on their own. Just then, João arrived, his school uniform spotless, looking at her with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Mom, did you see that he looks just like me, doesn't he?" he asked, with that innocence only children have. She stroked his hair and whispered, determined, "Mom is going to find out everything, sweetheart. I promise." João smiled, confident, unaware of the storm hidden behind that promise. Hours later, the detective called back, "Mrs. Beatriz, I found something. Mrs. Nilda and her husband, Adão, are well known around here. They say they've raised the boy since he was a baby, but no one knows where he came from. One day he showed up wrapped in a diaper, left near a church." A chill ran down Beatriz's spine. It was more than she had expected. She thanked him, hung up, and stared into the distance for a few seconds. A child abandoned, raised by strangers who somehow resembled her son. She knew what she had to do, even if she didn't know what she'd find at the end of the road. She arrived early on the street the detective had mentioned. Nervous, her hands sweaty, and her heart tight in her chest, she tried not to stand out. She wore something simple, jeans, a t-shirt, and sneakers. She didn't want to look like the wealthy widow stepping out of a luxury car to see the poor. She wanted to be an ordinary mother, a woman just looking for answers. She saw them from a distance, Raphael sitting on the ground, playing with a can as if it were a car, Mrs. Nilda picking up a bag, and Mr. Adão dozing against a wall covered in graffiti. She paused and watched the scene like a strange and beautiful painting. There was an unexpected peace that made everything harder. She took a deep breath and walked over slowly. Raphael looked at her and stopped playing. He didn't seem scared, just alert, as if expecting something. "Hi, sorry to bother you. I'm Beatrice," she said, kneeling to get on his level. Mrs. Nilda looked up. She recognized her instantly but said nothing. She didn't move. "We saw each other the other day. I was with my son João, I remember," she said slowly. The boy remained still, staring at Raphael. "I thought they were brothers," Beatrice admitted with a shy smile. Nilda looked at both of them, stayed quiet for a few seconds, and then asked, "And do you still think that?" Beatrice hesitated but decided to be honest. "I have my reasons to believe it." Silence returned. Raphael kept watching, with those eyes that held just the right mix of curiosity and suspicion, just like João's. "Look, Mom," Nilda began, "we've raised this boy since he was a baby. He showed up one morning wrapped in a blue blanket, wearing a diaper and a note that said, 'Please take care of him.' No one ever came for him. No one ever searched. We couldn't let him go." Beatrice felt a lump in her throat. "I'm deeply grateful to you." Nilda shook her head, still a little guarded. "But why now? Why are you looking for him just now? Maybe he's my husband's son, and maybe he has a brother who's been asking about him ever since." Raphael lowered his shoulders and looked at the ground, trying to understand, but clearly listening to every word. Nilda sighed. The tension was thick, but there was no anger, only a deep pain searching for a way out. "Do you want to take him with you?" she asked. Beatrice quickly shook her head. "No, I just want to get to know him better, to understand if he really is Arthur's son." Nilda stood slowly and remained beside her in silence. Beatrice felt the pain in her chest again. Raphael was so calm. He looked so much like João in those small gestures, but he wasn't some picture-perfect child. Raphael was a real boy, with a hard life and scars Beatrice couldn't even imagine. She wanted to do a blood test, a DNA test to be sure. "I'll pay for everything, no pressure, no rush. I just want to understand, not take him away from you, I swear," she told Nilda. Nilda was thoughtful. Her husband, Adão, was still asleep, unaware of everything. "If we can talk calmly, the right way, I just want to do what's best for him," Beatrice added. Raphael looked at Nilda and, in a low voice, asked, "Can I go?" Beatrice felt a lump in her throat and held back tears. Nilda ran a hand through his hair and said, "Let's think about it. We'll give you an answer tomorrow." Beatrice took a card from her purse and offered it to her. "Here's my number. Please call me. I'm not here to argue. I just haven't slept since the first time we saw each other." She stood up slowly, and Raphael watched her until she walked away. She turned around just once and gave him a smile, that kind of smile that seems to hold an entire world in your chest. Late in the afternoon, the phone rang. Beatrice rushed to answer, her heart racing. It was Nilda, her voice calm but firm. "We're willing to do the test." Beatrice gripped the phone tightly, a mix of relief and fear. She thanked her several times and asked if they could do it the next day. Nilda agreed, and they set the appointment. Beatrice ended the call and arranged for the test at a trusted lab. She explained the situation without going into detail. She wanted speed and discretion. They found a spot for the following morning. The next day, Beatrice went to pick up Raphael. They left the car at a distance and walked, to avoid attracting attention or making anyone uncomfortable. Raphael looked perfect, blue t-shirt, neatly combed hair. Nilda had done her best to make him presentable. Adome had stayed behind, saying, "That's women's business." In the car, Raphael looked out the window curiously, while Nilda sat with her hands folded in her lap. Beatrice tried to focus on the traffic, but her heart pounded. At the lab, they signed forms, made photocopies. Raphael had no official record, just a name scribbled on an old piece of paper and a small note Nilda had kept safe. The lab agreed to proceed on the condition they could verify identities and issue an official report. Raphael went in first. Beatrice and Nilda sat outside in silence. It was a strange silence, not heavy but uncomfortable, a silence that said more than 1,000 words. After a few minutes, Raphael came out, serious but calm. "It only hurt a little," he said. Beatrice smiled at him and gently squeezed his hand. Then she went in to finalize the paperwork. It all took less than half an hour. When they left, Beatrice walked them back to the corner where they had first met. Under the shade of a tree, Nilda gently pulled Raphael aside. "Thank you for treating him with respect," she said, looking Beatrice in the eyes. "I'm the one who should thank you. You've raised an incredible boy, no matter what the test says. You've been his family until now, and no one can ever take that from you." Raphael said nothing. He just listened. As Beatrice walked away, she turned one last time and saw someone waving at her. The days that followed were the longest of her life. Every time the phone rang, her heart jumped, hoping it was the lab, but it never was. She tried to keep things normal with João, but inside, everything had changed. The night before the result came, Beatrice couldn't sleep. She paced in the dark house, looked out the window, lay down, then got up again. The anxiety was eating her alive. It wasn't just about finding out whether Raphael was really Arthur's son. It was about what to do afterward. How would she tell João? How could she explain that the boy he saw on the street might be his brother? At dawn, the phone rang. It was the lab. "Mrs. Beatrice, the test results are ready. You can check them by email or come in person." Without replying, she rushed to the computer. With trembling hands, she opened the email, found the attached file titled Genetic Report, and clicked on the PDF. The document opened slowly, as if time had slowed down. Her eyes scanned to the end, where the verdict was printed in capital letters. Genetic compatibility confirmed. Parental test compatible at 99.9%. Beatrice collapsed into the chair, closed her eyes, and the tears began to fall. It wasn't a surprise, but the certainty hit her like a powerful wave. Raphael was Arthur's son, João's brother. She now had 2 sons. Sitting on the living room floor with the laptop still open, she listened to the silence in the house, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock, like a countdown. She didn't know what to do with that piece of paper in her hand. That truth she had both feared and longed for was now staring back at her. She got up slowly, went to the bedroom, and pulled out a box of old things belonging to her husband. She returned to the living room and started digging. Photos, letters, ticket stubs, everything still smelled like him, a scent that hurt. At the bottom of the box, she found a folded piece of paper she had never seen before. It was a crumpled receipt for a deposit with a name written on it, Luciana Mendes. Her heart leapt. She turned the computer back on, searched the name, and found a document with a tax ID number. It was her, the same woman who had vanished without a trace after working with Arthur. Now Beatrice didn't just have a son to understand, she also had evidence that Arthur had sent money to Luciana. It wasn't just a mistake from the past, it was a hidden story, a truth Arthur had tried to erase. She immediately called Detective Mauricio. "Are you still working on the case?" "Yes, Mrs. Beatrice. What do you need?" "You have to find Luciana as soon as possible. I have her full name, tax ID, and proof of a money transfer from Arthur." "Understood. I'll see what I can do." Beatrice closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This story was much bigger than she had imagined. It wasn't just about Raphael. It was about everything Arthur had left behind. Lies, secrets, and a child who had lived on the streets while she and João had everything. Later, João came home from school with his backpack slung to one side and his shoulders weighed down. Beatrice tried to act normal, but he noticed something right away. "Mum, are you okay?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I just have a lot on my mind." He sat next to her on the couch and rested his head on her arm. "It's about that boy you saw on the street, isn't it?" Beatrice looked at him silently, wondering if it was time to share at least part of the truth. She didn't say everything, but she confessed what she could. "Remember when you said maybe he was your brother?" "Yeah." João's eyes widened and he went quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Is he going to come live with us?" Beatrice hugged him tightly. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll find out together. But you need to know that he's important, just like you are." João fell silent, playing with his fingers. After a moment he said, "Can I share my room with him?" Beatrice cried, but said nothing. She hugged him again, feeling that what was coming would be painful, but maybe not as painful as she had feared. At least she wouldn't be alone. Hours later, the detective called. His voice on the other end was more alert than usual. "Mrs. Beatrice, I found something. Luciana lives in Sorocaba. She rented a modest apartment a few months ago. Her name is linked to suspicious transactions. She seems to have declared bankruptcy, lost everything, and is trying to hide what she did with Arthur. She's kept it all under wraps for a long time." Beatrice said nothing, her head spinning. She wanted to scream, to have answers, to understand why that woman never came back for her son, why she had left him to live on the street. "Can you give me the address?" "Yes." "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, I'll go alone." The next day, Beatrice drove alone to Sorocaba, having spent a sleepless night preparing the words she would say, imagining reactions, and bracing for truths. When she arrived in front of the modest building where Luciana lived, she sat for a few moments in the car, staring at the entrance, her heart pounding. The moment had come. Beatrice had to look in the eyes of the woman who held the other half of the truth. She slowly climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. In front of door number 302, her heart pounded as if it wanted to burst out of her chest. She knocked. Luciana opened the door. Her eyes widened the moment she saw who it was. She recognized Beatrice instantly, her face pale, shoulders tense. She looked petrified. "Beatrice, we need to talk," she said, almost whispering. After a few seconds of hesitation, Luciana unlocked the door and left it slightly ajar. The two women stood just a few steps apart, two distant worlds, bound by a shared fate. But Beatrice stood still. She didn't enter. As the door slowly closed behind her, she remained alone in the hallway. There was something tightening in her chest, a feeling she couldn't explain, anger, relief, fear, all at once. She stared at the closed door, took a deep breath, and walked away with no clear destination. It was strange to feel so much pain for someone she didn't even know, a woman who had a child with the man Beatrice had loved with all her heart. A few days later, local newspapers began to publish reports. Small articles, but enough to stir whispers. Luciana's financial collapse, a wave of debts, a string of civil lawsuits. Everyone was talking about the woman who had vanished years ago with a baby in her arms and had now returned to claim the inheritance of a wealthy, deceased man. Beatriz felt her stomach twist every time she read something on her phone, and that's when Antonio Ramiro showed up, an elegant lawyer, confident, with a firm voice and steady gaze. He arrived at her doorstep one sweltering afternoon, unannounced. Beatriz opened the door, surprised. She had never seen him before in her life. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Beatriz. I'm attorney Antonio Ramiro. I represent Ms. Luciana. May I come in for a moment?" He entered with the air of someone used to being heard. Still stunned, Beatriz invited him in. She grabbed her purse and sat across from him while he calmly adjusted his tie. Beatriz's heart was pounding. He smiled. "I'm here to talk about Raphael's custody. My client has full rights and intends to pursue them to the end. Miss Luciana plans to take legal action, and your late husband, Raphael's brother, won't be able to stop it." The words hit her like stones. The ground seemed to crumble beneath her. The lawyer spoke of family rights, inheritance, custody. But to Beatriz, those words sounded hollow, cold, disconnected from the reality she had lived. "He's just a child," she said, trying to stay calm. "I don't want a war. I just want him to be safe, to grow up with stability, love, fairness." Ramiro replied coldly. "What he needs is his real mother. She raised him alone, she suffered, and now she wants to make it right. This is only the first phase. We've already gathered evidence, messages, bank transfers from Artur, photos, documents." Beatriz felt crushed, vulnerable, betrayed by truths she didn't know. "I'll do everything I can for him, sir. But if that means going to court, then I will fight." She swallowed her tears with difficulty. Ramiro stood and nodded with an icy smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Beatriz. Let's stay in touch. Have a good day." He left without looking back. When the door closed, it wasn't just a man leaving. Beatriz felt like an enemy had just entered her life. From that moment on, everything changed. Letters began to arrive, notifications, requests for documents. Every envelope was a bomb. Luciana accused her of emotional neglect. There were psychological reports claiming that Raphael missed his biological mother. Beatriz cut off all contact. She couldn't bear the thought, ripping a child away from his roots, from the people who truly loved him. Every paper she opened was a blow to the heart. She would read, breathe, close the envelope, and try not to fall apart. João sensed the tension at home. That night, he came up slowly. "Mom, can I sleep with you tonight?" Beatriz held him tight, the two of them sitting together on the couch. "Of course, sweetheart. Mommy is doing everything she can to protect you both. That's all that matters." But deep down, truly, she was scared. A fear she couldn't shake. Fear of losing Raphael. Fear of the lies they might build. Fear of that sharp, fast smile from the lawyer, capable of turning truth into a weapon. Antonio Ramiro wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He had become the enemy, with a face and a name. Each letter, each official notice bearing his stamp was an attack, a calculated threat against the fragile calm with which Beatriz tried to hold a broken family together. But the worst part was knowing that deep down, that man had some truth on his side. Luciana hadn't come empty-handed. She had proof, messages, documents, and Beatriz only had love. But maybe now she would have to learn how to fight too. That day she was in court, her hands ice-cold, her heart pounding like a drum. The courtroom was enormous and silent. The only sounds were the slow-turning ceiling fan and the soft rustle of papers in the lawyer's hands. She never imagined she'd end up there, defending her love for a child she hadn't even known existed just weeks before. But Raphael was part of her now, and she wouldn't give up. Luciana sat across from her, her hair neatly done, dressed in sober elegance, light makeup. She tried to appear calm, composed, but never looked Beatriz in the eye. Not out of shame, out of calculation. Ramiro organized his documents with surgical precision. Every movement seemed pre-rehearsed, as if he already knew how it would end. When the judge opened the session, he was the first to rise. "Your Honor, my client, Luciana Mendes, is the biological mother of little Raphael, 7 years old. She was forced to stay away due to severe mental health issues, which are documented by medical reports. She did not abandon him out of malice. Now, recovered, she wants to rebuild her bond with her son. But not only that. He took a few slow steps across the room. She is requesting full custody. She is the only living direct relative. Beatrice felt her stomach twist. The words were clear, firm, delivered with confidence, and supported by documents. They seemed irrefutable. The judge turned to her. "Would you like to say something, ma'am?" Beatrice stood. She was afraid, but she didn't tremble. "Your Honor, I met Raphael by chance, but he is the son of my late husband. He's a child who, as a baby, was abandoned on the streets, entrusted to a homeless couple. No one was looking for him. No one claimed him. And now that there's an inheritance at stake, the mother shows up at my door with a lawyer." Ramiro stood up abruptly. "Objection! Baseless accusations. My client is here for her child, not money." Beatrice didn't lower her gaze. "I speak not out of anger. I speak because I saw him sleeping on the pavement, because I know what he's lived through. And now that he's finally found a home, a woman arrives, backed by the law." The judge called for order. Then came the witnesses. The first was Donna Nilda. She wore simple clothes and carried a dignified expression. She told everything. How they found Raphael, how they raised him as their own, never receiving a visit, a question, a word from that mother. "We're nobody, Your Honor, but he never lacked food or clothes or hugs. No one came for him, no one. And now this woman shows up after years." Luciana shed a single tear. Strategically, she had to appear moved. Next was a social worker. She said Raphael had been recently evaluated, showed affection for Beatrice, a growing bond with João, and had developed a sense of security in the new environment. Beatrice closed her eyes silently, a small moment of gratitude. But Ramiro didn't rest. He brought out medical reports, diagnoses, hospital records. He spoke of depression, psychiatric hospitalizations, a Luciana too fragile to care for a baby. He showed photos of her in the hospital, thin, exhausted. It was a heavy blow. The judge remained silent. Then scheduled the next hearing for 2 weeks later. No decision, no provisional custody. Raphael, for the time being, would stay with Beatrice, but without legal guardianship. Outside, Ramiro approached Beatrice. "Don't get your hopes up, Mom. This is just the beginning." She didn't respond. She looked him directly in the eyes and thought, "I'm not done either." In the car, Raphael looked out the window, watching the world go by. "Is everything okay, Mom?" "Yes, my love. We're together, and that's what matters." But from that day on, something broke. Beatrice tried to keep up the routine, but the house seemed to reflect the chaos inside her. The kitchen was messy, the plants dried out. Joan's homework got lost in piles of papers and photocopies. Her life revolved around court hearings, and the day-to-day was slipping through her fingers. Until one night, the doorbell rang. It was the mailman, a large envelope. Sender, Law Office of Antonio Ramiro. Beatrice opened it. Inside was a thick case file full of accusations, secretly taken photos showing her asleep while Raphael was awake, manipulated messages, testimonies from neighbors who claimed they heard a child crying in the house, a carefully staged setup, a perfect attack. She lost her breath. Luciana and Ramiro had prepared a dirty plan. This wasn't love, it was strategy. So Beatrice called Simone, then Mauricio, the detective. The war had just begun. It was time to show the truth. Beatrice and her allies began gathering anything that could prove it. Testimonies from neighbors who had seen Raphael playing with João in the yard, photos of him sleeping in her arms after a fever, stories from the nearby nursing home where she brought flowers to his adoptive grandparents. Every detail was proof of love, but Luciana played on a different field. Those very same photos, those messages full of affection, were stolen and ended up in the local papers. Cruel headlines, poisonous insinuations, wealthy woman neglects dead husband's son, boy begs to return to his biological mother. Even a coffee stain on a blanket was turned into evidence of negligence. Beatrice's image was twisted into a story that wasn't hers. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, acquaintances, Joan's teachers. Everyone wanted to know. Everyone had heard something. What had been an intimate and painful moment had become a spectacle. But nothing hurt more than seeing Joan, with a dull expression, walk into the kitchen and quietly ask, "Mom, is it true you kicked Raphael out of the house? That you only give him chocolate if he behaves?" She hugged him tightly. "My love, no. I would never treat you that way, either of you." But inside, everything hurt. Luciana no longer seemed like a mother wanting to hold her child. She looked like a general at war, ready to destroy everything with well-crafted lies, willing to pay any price to win. The next day, Beatrice made a decision. She hired a press manager. "We need to tell the truth. We need to take back the narrative." They released an official statement, confirming the DNA test, explaining that Raphael had never been abandoned, that his biological mother had been involved in a bankruptcy case, and that everything had been handled within the law. But it was like trying to block the sunset with an umbrella. Too late, too little. At the next hearing, the judge reviewed Luciana's submitted documents carefully. Many were clearly fake, cropped messages, phrases taken out of context, edited photos. Her lawyer tried to defend them, but the cracks were obvious. Beatrice, with a steady voice, presented honest witnesses, people who had seen Raphael fall asleep in her arms, who confirmed the bond with Joan, the everyday life full of affection they shared under the same roof. It was exhausting, but slowly, the truth began to emerge from the mud. Still, even though the lies had been exposed, Beatrice knew the damage was done. That dirty plan had planted doubt, left wounds, and delayed everything. The process would drag on. Again. When she got home that night, she collapsed onto the couch. Joan and Raphael were asleep, hugging each other, exhausted. She looked at them, her hands trembling. "We'll make it," she whispered, brushing their hair. "But we're doing this for him, more than for us." It wasn't over. But now Beatrice was ready to fight with everything she had. She wouldn't let two such pure smiles be destroyed by a web of lies. And things inside the house began to change. Not all at once. Slowly. Like water seeping through a crack. Silence replaced laughter. Meals became shorter. Conversations scarce. Joan, who always used to run in to tell how his day had gone, now just walked in, dropped his backpack on the floor, and went upstairs without a word. Raphael seemed to walk on eggshells. He stared at the floor, avoided eye contact with his brother. He spent his days quietly, drawing in a corner as if he wanted to disappear. Beatrice could feel it in the air. Something had cracked. The house was full, but it felt empty. Every conversation ended quickly, cut short by brief phrases, tense faces, heavy silences. One afternoon, while she was doing the dishes, she heard shouting from upstairs. She ran up the stairs and found the two boys face to face, their eyes filled with rage. "You're not really my brother!" Joan shouted, tears running down his cheeks. Raphael didn't answer. He just lowered his head, his eyes shining but silent. Beatrice knelt in front of Joan, trying to meet his gaze. "Why would you say that?" "Because now everything's about him," he sobbed. "At school, everyone talks about him, everyone looks at him. And you follow him around everywhere. And with me, you don't even notice when I'm sad." Those words hit her like punches. She tried to hug him, but Joan pulled away. Raphael left the room without a word. He went to the living room, sat in front of the turned-off TV. He wanted to scream, cry, stop everything, but he just breathed slowly and sat there still. Later, when the silence had returned to the house, Beatrice went into Joan's room. She sat beside him on the edge of the bed. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to feel left out. But I do," he whispered, not looking at her. She continued in a calm voice. "I love you, both of you. I'm trying to keep everything together, but you're my first son, my little adventure partner from the very beginning, and that will never change." Joan let himself cry silently, then curled up in his mother's lap, and she gently stroked his hair until he fell asleep. The next day, Beatrice tried to connect with Raphael. Just the two of them. They went to the park. She bought him an ice cream. They sat on an old wooden bench. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, shrugging. "I don't want to be a bother. I just wanted to spend some time with you." You're not a bother, Rafa. You're part of our family," she said, looking at him with tenderness. He lowered his gaze, then murmured, "I like João, but I think he hates me." "He doesn't hate you. He's just scared. He's a kid too. It'll take time, but we'll get there." Raphael nodded, though he didn't seem to fully believe it. That night, Beatrice called them both to the couch, one on each side. She pulled out an old photo album, João's first words, his first steps, his first day at the beach. Raphael watched in silence. "You'll have your moments too, Rafa. We're starting now." João didn't say anything. Then he picked up the album and flipped a page. "This was me at Christmas," he said quietly. Beatrice smiled. For a moment, they looked like a family. A simple, real moment. No fights, no accusations, just three people trying to understand one another. But she knew. The storm wasn't over. It would take time, patience. Raphael had arrived with a suitcase full of absences. João with jealousy and fear of losing his mother. And she with a heart torn in two between two kinds of love, so different, yet so alike. That night, Beatrice was woken by a soft noise. She stepped into the hallway and saw a scene that clenched her heart. Raphael sleeping on a small mattress in João's room, and João moving slowly, covering him with a blanket. No one said a word. Beatrice quietly closed the door, rested her forehead against the wood, and cried. The next morning felt like a normal day. Coffee in the kitchen, backpacks ready, uniforms folded on the bed. But when she went to wake Raphael, she found the room empty, the mattress made, the blanket folded. Her heart raced. She shouted his name through the house. Nothing. She checked the bathroom, the garden, the patio. Silence. João showed up, sleepy-eyed. "Where's Raphael?" Beatrice didn't answer. She grabbed her phone and ran out. She called Doña Nilda, Detective Mauricio, even Simone. No one had heard anything. João stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. "It's my fault, if he's gone." She hugged him tightly. "No, sweetheart, it's not your fault. It's just a scare. We'll find him." Meanwhile, Raphael walked alone through the city, a small backpack on his back. Inside, a notebook, a t-shirt, a pencil, and an old photo he'd found in a drawer. Him and João, smiling, still unaware of how complicated life could be. He didn't know where he was going. He just wanted to disappear for a while. He thought João hated him, that Beatrice was tired of him, that his real mother wanted him back, but he couldn't even remember her face. He walked to the house where Doña Nilda and Mr. Adan lived. There he saw the old man sitting on a stool, a bag of bread in his hands. "Look who's here," the man said. "What are you doing here alone, kid?" "Can I stay for a while?" Raphael asked quietly. Adan nodded. Shortly after, Nilda arrived with a bottle of coffee. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "For God's sake, Raphael, are you trying to give us a heart attack?" "I didn't run away. I just needed to think." "Think by disappearing? Is that how you want your mother to die of fright?" "She's not my mother," he blurted out. Silence fell like a weight. Nilda sat beside him. "And you think running away is going to fix anything?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the ground. Meanwhile, Beatrice was driving through the streets, her hands trembling on the wheel. She turned a corner and saw them, all three of them, sitting. She couldn't believe it. She slammed on the brakes and ran toward Raphael. He stood up slowly. He thought she was going to scold him, force him to go back. But no. Beatrice hugged him tight, a hug trembling between relief and fear. "Don't ever do that again, please," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to disappear for a while." She looked into his eyes. "If you ever want to disappear, we disappear together, but never alone again." They thanked Nilda and Adan. They returned home in silence. But it was a different kind of silence, one that heals. The silence of those who've understood that even when everything seems to fall apart, love remains. That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep. Raphael was back in his bed, but the image of him alone, backpack on his shoulders, wouldn't leave her mind. She sat in the kitchen, a glass of water in her hand, but she didn't drink it. She watched the water tremble, just like her hand, just like her heart. She went to João's room. He was sleeping peacefully, blanket up to his chin. Then she entered Raphael's room. He was sleeping on his side, hugging a pillow, as if trying to hide from the world, and Beatrice stayed there, keeping watch, in silence, with a full heart, wounded but full. Beatrice went back to the living room, collapsed on the couch, and sank into the cushions. The tears came immediately, real ones, uncontrollable, the kind that shake your chest and hurt. It wasn't just about him running away. It was everything. The pressure, the chaos of the court battle with Luciana, the lawyer's sharp accusations, the town's poisonous gossip, the constant fear of losing everything she had built with so much effort. She was trying to hold it all together with one hand, but now that hand was shaking. She got up, started pacing around the house without knowing where to go, opened cabinets, moved objects, went into the bathroom, and came right back out. Picked up her planner, began crossing out appointments she couldn't even remember the reason for, tore out a page accidentally, and that was the moment when everything fell apart. She sat on the living room floor and cried again, as if the world had collapsed on top of her mercilessly. In the middle of the night, with a broken voice, she called Simone. "Sorry to call you this late, but I'm losing it." On the other end, her friend's voice was filled with concern, but she stayed there, listening silently. Beatrice told her everything, the despair, the panic, the feeling of not being able to go on. She said sometimes she just wanted to take the kids and disappear. "If I'm going to get into trouble, I'd rather it be far from here. My friend, you're not alone. I'm here, but you need to breathe. If you fall apart, who's going to hold those two boys together?" Beatrice didn't respond. It was true, but at that moment, she didn't even have the strength to reply. She hung up, went back to her room, and lay down. Tried to sleep, but just stared at the ceiling, body drained of energy. Her mind had already shut down, and now even her body was starting to give out. When the sunlight began to filter through the windows, she was already in the kitchen, making coffee like every morning, her eyes sunken, her face tense. It looked like she hadn't slept in days. Raphael was the first to arrive. Barefoot, rubbing his eyes, he looked at her. He sensed right away that something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" She tried to smile, but couldn't. "Yeah, Mommy's just a little tired." He sat down, watched her move around, prepare the cups, spread butter on the bread. She was trying desperately to appear normal. A little later, João arrived. He sat next to his brother and remained quiet. But both of them could feel it. Something had changed. The air in the house had become heavier. After breakfast, Beatrice locked herself in her room. She sat on the bed and picked up Arthur's letter again. She had read it 1,000 times, but now the words felt different. Full of regret, but now useless. He had run away, leaving her with a ticking bomb in her hands. Now she was alone. Against Luciana, against Ramiro, against exhaustion. She left the room and called her lawyer. "I can't do this anymore. We need to speed things up, whatever it takes, a new defense strategy, a complaint, I don't know, but no more games. I want this over." On the other end, the lawyer tried to calm her, keep her balanced. "Balance? I have none left. I only have those two boys. And they're the only reason I'm still standing. Everything else, inside, I'm dead." She hung up, took a deep breath, washed her face and returned to the living room. The boys were playing a board game. João was laughing, Raphael smiling shyly. A simple scene, but in that moment, it was everything. Beatrice sat down and watched them. She thought, if I fall, they fall with me. And in that moment, she made a decision. She would fight, to the very end. But first, she had to stand up. Because if she didn't take care of herself, she wouldn't be able to take care of them. And they were everything. That day, the courthouse hallway felt longer. Beatrice walked slowly but with a steady step, head held high, even if inside she was a whirlwind. Raphael was with Simone. Joan was at school. She was alone, but she was no longer weak. Her lawyer, Dr. Alvaro, was already there. He gave her a look. No words needed. They knew what had to be done. As soon as she entered, she saw Luciana, flawless, hair done, makeup perfect, her face calm, but her eyes tense. Beside her, the impeccable Dr. Ramiro, with his briefcase and arrogant air. The judge entered silently. Everyone stood. When they were invited to sit, Beatrice grabbed her skirt and took a deep breath. The hearing began. Ramiro spoke first, with his clean, rehearsed tone. "Your Honor, my client is here because she doesn't want her son to grow up away from his biological mother. She made mistakes, yes, but now she wants to rebuild that bond. Raphael has the right to know who his mother is, to live with her, to grow up with dignity and love." Beatrice lowered her gaze. She felt the weight of every word. But when Alvaro stood, she looked into his eyes. "Your Honor, this is not just about biology. It's about who was there, who protected, loved, and raised Raphael. He was abandoned on the street, then taken in by two extraordinary people who had nothing but gave everything. Now he has a home, a routine, affection, and now the biological mother shows up and wants to tear him away from all of it. But with what kind of stability?" the judge asked to hear from the witnesses. The first was a social worker. She read her report calmly. She spoke of the bond between Raphael and Beatrice, about Joan, about their emotional balance, and she concluded a sudden change could cause confusion, insecurity, even trauma. Luciana shook her head. She didn't accept it. The judge then requested to hear from Raphael. Beatrice froze. She looked at her lawyer, who nodded. He was authorized. Raphael entered through the side door, accompanied by a psychologist. Light blue shirt, new shoes, Beatrice's gift. He sat in a lower chair, facing the judge. "Raphael, do you know why you're here?" He nodded. "We want to know how you feel about your mother, about Beatrice, where you'd like to live. Say it in your own words." Raphael looked down, then looked up and said, "I want to be with my mom, with Beatrice. She listens to me, makes me food, helps me with homework. I have a room, a closet. I never had those things before." Silence. "The other lady left me. I don't remember her well. I was alone for a long time. With Grandma Nilda and Grandpa Adan, I love them too. But now I have a home." Beatrice could barely hold back her tears. She could barely breathe. The judge thanked Raphael. He walked out with his back straight. In the end, the judge requested final statements. Ramiro spoke elegantly, but coldly. Alvaro was direct. Sometimes biology must step aside for the truth, and that truth was visible to everyone. Justice isn't always found in documents. Sometimes it's found in a child's eyes, and in Raphael's eyes there was only one desire: to stay, to keep being a child, to remain in peace. The judge raised his eyes and asked for silence. He stood up slowly and said he would return shortly with the final decision. Time in that courtroom seemed to stand still. Beatrice fidgeted nervously with her hands. Luciana tried to stay composed, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Ramiro paced beside her, as if words alone could change fate. The judge returned. Everyone stood. He spoke of the case's complexity, of truth, of responsibility. Then, with a firm but heartfelt voice, he said, "Full custody of the minor, Raphael, is granted to Ms. Beatrice Moura. Ms. Luciana Mendez may request supervised visits with psychological support." Beatrice's heart tightened. She couldn't breathe. She held back a scream, but tears streamed down her face. Luciana turned pale. Ramiro lowered his gaze, defeated. Beatrice walked out of the courtroom without looking back. She grabbed her phone. "Is Raphael there?" "Yes," Simone replied, and passed him the phone. "Mom," came the little voice, and for the first time in a long while she cried, smiling. Luciana left the courthouse with the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her heels clicked hard on the sidewalk, but her step was that of someone who had lost. Ramiro followed silently. He no longer looked at her. The air between them was heavy. When they reached the parking lot, she stopped abruptly. "You promised me we would win." Ramiro looked at her firmly, hurt. "I promised I would try, but you hid too much from me. I told you everything. The letters, the receipts." "Yes, I knew. But I didn't know you were asking for compassion while renting a luxury apartment with hidden money." Luciana blushed. "Are you judging me?" "I'm not saying you were stupid, just that you wanted to look remorseful, but you spent more on your hair than on groceries." She looked around, lowered her voice. "This is your fault. You're the lawyer. You were supposed to make me win." Ramiro shut the car door slowly, unbothered. He opened his backpack and pulled out an envelope. "Here are your documents. I no longer represent you. You've got nothing left to offer. The judge saw who you really are." Luciana stood there, envelope in hand. She watched him drive off without even saying goodbye. In that moment, she was no one. Not a mother, not a client, not a victim. Just silence. The following days were even worse. The court's decision reached the press. But this time, the truth came out. No articles paid for by Ramiro. Everything was revealed. The abandonment, the lies, the money she swindled using her late husband's name. People judged her without mercy. Calculating, cold, liar. She was fired. Old friends blocked her everywhere. She tried to sell her story to a TV station, but no one wanted to hear from a regretful mother. One day, she went to Raphael's school gate. She hoped to see him, without permission, but the principal immediately called Beatrice. When she arrived, Luciana was sitting on the curb, eyes vacant. "You can't do this," Beatrice said firmly. Luciana slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes were deep, dim. "I just wanted to see him. After all the lies, after trying to turn him against me." Luciana sighed, tried to stand, but her body felt heavy. "I've lost everything. He's all I have left." Beatrice stayed silent for a moment, then spoke calmly. "Then change. Not for him, for you. He's fine. He's happy. He doesn't need more problems." Luciana nodded. Beatrice walked away without looking back. A few days later, Luciana received a letter from the court. "Any contact outside of authorized visits will be considered a violation. Penalty, arrest." Luciana tore the letter up, threw it away, then sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes, second-hand clothes, unpaid bills, memories. On her phone screen, an old photo, her and Arthur laughing at a company party. The past felt colder, more distant. She had nothing left, no son, no reputation, only the certainty that she had gone too far. Meanwhile, time began to flow differently for Beatrice too. She still woke up early, made coffee, fixed the beds, packed lunch for school. But now there was a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Not the peace from commercials. A real peace. No one was knocking at her door to take away what she loved. João and Raphael still argued, but something had changed. One day as she passed by their slightly open bedroom door, Beatrice saw them lying on the same bed, both with headphones, watching the same video, not speaking, laughing together. That was enough. No need for endless hugs or movie-like tears. Just sharing space, a silence. Even a phone screen, like brothers do, even on weekends. Beatrice decided to cook something special. It wasn't a celebration, just a desire for good smells at home. She grabbed rice, made stroganoff, crispy potatoes, grape juice. João sliced strawberries. Raphael washed the salad. They laughed together without resentment. The pure smile of a child was safe, at home. After eating, Beatrice sat on the porch with a glass of sparkling water. She watched them run in the yard, play with a ball, and remembered Raphael as a small boy on the sidewalk, João yelling, "You're not my brother," herself wanting to give up. But now the house was a home. And the family finally felt like a family. That night, Raphael called her to his room. He had a notebook open with a drawing. "It's us, you, João, and me, in our house, with a tree and a dog, even though we don't have one yet. Maybe someday," Beatrice replied with a smile. João appeared at the door holding a pillow. "Can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course," Raphael answered before she could. Joan jumped on the bed next to his brother. And in that moment it was clear, nothing else was needed. Beatrice turned off the lights slowly and watched them through the crack in the door, then went to her own room, lay down, but sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about how things can suddenly change, how everything can fall apart and still be rebuilt. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Simone. "And how are the 3 men in your life?" Beatrice replied with a photo taken from the window. The 2 boys asleep, one at each end of the bed, sharing the same blanket, so whole for the first time. The reply came instantly, "You too." And it was true. After so long, Beatrice felt that she too could be whole again. That night, the house was wrapped in silence. Only the fan hummed slowly, and the sound of Beatrice's keyboard clicks filled the air. She was in the office, trying to sort through months of piled-up papers. Amid bills, school documents, and matters left unresolved since the custody battle, she found a folder she had forgotten. One of those old plastic folders with a loose elastic band. Inside, receipts, handwritten notes from Arthur, and at the bottom a brown envelope with no name or date. It had just been sitting there. She opened it without much thought. What she found nearly took her breath away. A letter written by Arthur, in that familiar handwriting. "I sat down as soon as I could because I knew this wasn't just anything, Beggar. If you're reading this, it means everything has already happened. I didn't have the courage to tell you in life, so I wrote about Raphael. I knew he existed. Luciana told me right after he was born, but then she vanished. I never saw him again. I kept looking." Beatrice closed her eyes. Her heart pounded. Even not knowing where he was, she had never been able to ignore the idea that one of her children might be out there, alone. "That's why I left something for him, in the safe in Dr. Caillo's office. My lawyer knows what to do if Raphael ever shows up." Beatrice jumped up, grabbed the phone, and called Dr. Caillo's office. He was Arthur's lawyer, that discreet, almost invisible guy, but always effective. When someone answered, she got straight to the point. "Doctor, this is Beatrice, Arthur's widow. I found a letter from him mentioning a safe with something set aside for Raphael. Do you know what that's about?" There was silence, then a firm reply. "Yes, I know, but I can only hand it over in person, and only to you." The next day, Beatrice went to the office. The place was simple but neat. Dr. Caillo always looked the same. Big glasses, an old suit, and a serious, unchanging expression. He explained that Arthur had left a folder to be delivered only if Raphael was found and confirmed to be his son. Arthur suspected Luciana had disappeared with the boy, but was never sure if he was really his. Beatrice listened carefully, holding every word close to her heart. Dr. Caillo handed her the folder. Inside was a letter addressed to Raphael, a bank card for a high-value account, and the deed to a property in the boy's name. Arthur had left an inheritance, not a huge fortune, but enough to guarantee him education and a decent future. He wanted Raphael to be cared for, even without knowing where he was. He had faith they would one day be reunited. Beatrice went home with the folder resting on her lap as if carrying a living piece of Arthur. When she arrived, Raphael was on the couch playing on his phone with Joan. She sat beside him. "I want to show you something," she said. Raphael put down the phone, curious. She opened the folder and gave him the letter. He read it silently, eyes wide open, clutching the paper tightly. When he finished, he looked at her slowly. "He loved me." Beatrice took him into her lap and answered without hesitation. "He loved you more than anything, even before he knew you." Raphael cried. It wasn't a cry of pain, but relief. He finally knew that after all he had been loved, and that he finally had a place in the world. Beatrice still had Arthur's folder in her purse when she got a call from Detective Mauricio. Her throat instantly went dry. "Mrs. Beatrice, we have news about Dr. Ramiro." She hurried to the office. Ramiro had stayed away from Luciana's case for weeks, but was still handling Arthur's inheritance. Upon arrival, Mauricio was in the lobby, looking tense, as if expecting something or someone to show up at any moment. "We've uncovered something serious," he said bluntly. Ramiro had manipulated Luciana and Rafael's documents to siphon off part of Artur's inheritance, and he did it without any legal authorization. Beatriz was speechless. Ramiro wasn't on her side, but she had trusted him until she discovered this betrayal. Her voice trembled as Mauricio explained. He inserted clauses allowing Luciana to withdraw up to 30% of Rafael's reserved funds. He used forged evidence in court to justify the withdrawals. All the money went into an intermediate account under his name. Do you think he invested it for Rafael's benefit? Beatrice stammered, incredulous. Yes, he took more than he should and never accounted for it. Luciana thought she was getting help, but actually he was doing the dirty work for her. With such a weak defense, no one noticed the withdrawals until now. She felt a mix of anger and relief. The dirty scheme was bigger than she imagined. "So what do we do now?" Mauricio took a deep breath. "We have evidence, bank statements, communications with the bank manager explaining everything. He still tries to make it look like he's acting in the boy's best interest, but it's all for his own gain." Soon after, they arrived at the detective's office, where a video showed Ramiro confessing everything during a meeting. Beatrice read his statement. He claimed to act in the best interests of Luciana and her daughter, but it was clear he only thought of himself. The case was forwarded to the juvenile prosecutor's office. A criminal investigation was opened for embezzlement, breach of trust, and forgery. Messages exchanged with Luciana proved she knew everything. Beatrice found herself in a new battle against a different enemy, one who stole from everyone and had to pay. The next morning, Dr. Cayo's office received a court order to freeze Ramiro's account. Beatrice accompanied Mauricio to the bank, where she sadly watched the process: account blocks, document seals, delivery of copies. They discovered Ramiro had diverted even more money than initially thought. Part was invested in a luxury villa, the rest was in offshore accounts under ghost companies. At home, Beatrice sat with the boys in the living room. She showed Rafael that besides protection and love, he now also had part of the inheritance Artur left him. They didn't say much. They knew they had one more reason to smile. With the money finally unlocked by the courts, Beatrice began planning the future: private school for the kids, psychological support for Rafael and João. After all they had been through, the wounds were still there. Things money couldn't erase but could help heal. The most important thing was the feeling of justice. When she learned Ramiro would be arrested and might even lose his law license, she felt she could finally turn the page. On the day of the arrest, Beatrice went to court, without makeup, in jeans, and entered through the main door. She saw officers escort Ramiro out in handcuffs through the back exit. Luciana sat there motionless, having lost her chance to see Rafael. Beatrice left with a lighter heart. The final blow had been dealt. In the car, through the rearview mirror, she saw Rafael asleep in the back seat, João resting on his shoulder. Rafael's hand lay in the pocket where he kept the letter and the inheritance deed. A silence of relief surrounded her. "We did it," she whispered. There were no shouts or celebrations, but there was truth, and that was worth more than any victory. On a grey Saturday, Beatrice woke up in the quiet house. The kids were still asleep, and the smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but she didn't notice. That week had been different. After the legal battle ended and Ramiro's arrest, peace was beginning to settle in. But there was something she couldn't get out of her mind. A box, the only one she hadn't opened yet, kept in Arta's closet, hidden in a secret double bottom. She'd always known it was there, but never had the courage. She thought it held too many memories and pain. That morning she went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and took out the box. She sat on the bed with it in her lap. Small, dark wood, no lock. The lid opened easily. Inside were documents, photos, old letters, and at the bottom, a black notebook, a diary. She hesitated, then opened it. The first pages were simple notes about work and stress, like anyone would write. But then the tone changed. The name Luciana appeared, and shortly after, a name Beatrice didn't expect, Gustavo. She frowned and flipped through pages until everything became clear. I discovered that Raphael might not be my son. Luciana had a long relationship with my brother Gustavo. They were together before she started working with me. Now, after everything, she tells me the boy might be his. Beatrice froze, as if time had stopped. Her heart raced wildly in her chest, fast and out of control. The diary's words were there, but she knew she had read too much already. Still, she continued as if she needed to, despite the pain. I never wanted to know the truth, she read quietly. I never did a test, never looked for answers. Because even if it were true, Raphael is mine, in a way blood cannot explain. She paused, and for a moment felt a new, strange pressure in her chest. Arthur knew. He knew Raphael might not be his son, but he chose to love him within that secret. He kept that truth only to himself, like a silent burden. She turned the page slowly. There was an old yellowed photo glued to the diary, Arthur, Gustavo, and little Raphael in Luciana's arms, their faces sharp, full of an untold story. Beatrice hugged the diary to her chest, took a deep breath, feeling the truth beating inside her. Raphael wasn't Arthur's son, he was her brother's nephew, but it didn't matter. It didn't change what she felt, what they had built together. That truth was now hers alone, a secret kept in the silence of her heart. Later, while the children played in the yard, she watched them from the porch. João kicked the ball joyfully, and Raphael laughed loudly with that simple, genuine happiness of someone who is home. They were okay. They were together. Brothers forever, and that was enough. Beatrice picked up the diary again. She read Arthur's last words, like a final lesson. If one day this truth comes to light, I hope it shows that blood isn't everything. Love is what holds the world up. Carefully, she closed the notebook and put it back in the box. She went upstairs to the attic, placed the box on a high shelf, and covered it with a soft cloth. That truth would stay there, only with her. Raphael was the son of her heart, and that was all that mattered. That night, Beatrice lay down on the couch, the children on each side. The TV was playing some random movie, and the blanket wrapped around them like an invisible hug. For the first time in a long while, she fell asleep, smiling. Did you enjoy today's story? Then subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.